Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, Luka Donćić lights up Great Britain. And Dalton Knecht is falling in a 2024 redraft. What exactly does that mean? We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your very first listen of every day, at least Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one is always going to be free for you. We're never going to make you pay for it. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 36,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom were excited, as we often get in America, for another chance to stick it to the British, just like we did George Washington, Battle of Concord, and other things like that. With the
hashtag never forget.
That's right. Taxation without representation.
Yeah, we got your tea right here. Great Britain's basketball team.
We see you still, King George.
Tax this.
And Luca stepping up for Slovenia. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or something like that. The Slovenians, they beat up on Great Britain, led by Luka on Tuesday. We'll get to that in a moment. Obviously, Lakers fans most excited by the fact that Luka was out there looking good, not necessarily at the satisfaction of our traditional basketball rivals, the British. So we'll get to that in a moment. We'll get to Dalton Knecht and a potentially disturbing evaluation of his rookie season. But first,
or as we may get into, also potentially a bit illuminating with our conversation about the evaluations of Dalton Knecht.
Those things are not mutually exclusive. Good point. I do want to let people know that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's like we took 50% off the life of the British today, thanks to Slovenia and Luka Donćić. It was not a surprise to see Luka back on the floor. We actually talked about it on Tuesday's show, Andy, that Luka was back at practice for Slovenia and expected to play against the British on Tuesday. And that he did. And so the injury was obviously not that big of a deal, the injury scare over the course of the weekend, but it was still not only good to see Luka on the floor, but then turn around and play a strong game against the Brits. 21 points in the first half, 28 overall. He had 10 assists and 6 rebounds, made it to the free throw line 14 times. That's where he ate most of his production. I don't know. He ate. That's where he ate.
But in a good way. So it's clear Luka ate in a good way.
Yes, that's true.
He's made so much progress this offseason. I want to make it very clear. This was positive eating for Luka.
Right. This is the sort of thing that he's supposed to be eating.
He's allowed to eat like this.
The dreams and hopes of the British. And so had Luka been able to hit a shot from the perimeter, he was 2 of 11 from 3-point range. So not terribly efficient there. Had he been able to do that, he probably would have been, I don't know, somewhere in the 40s before he sat down. He didn't even need to finish the game. So a strong effort for Luka Donćić. Thus far, it hasn't gone great for Slovenia in terms of their results in the ramp up to the Eurobasket competition. But Luka himself has played pretty well, particularly considering the long layoff and the fact that he gets a tremendous amount of attention from opposing defenses.
Yeah, truth be told, because you mentioned the 2 of 11 from behind the arc, while it's going to be better for Luka in the regular season, the regular NBA season, I should say, like the games that Laker fans are truly most concerned about, I kind of feel like in some ways Luka's 3-point shot, when it is on, and particularly with the step back, it is deadly, but I don't consider it the strongest part of Luka's game, in all honesty. And if that's the part that is cooperating the least in, I don't even want to say it's a ramp up from his offseason because he spent his offseason working his ass off, but he didn't do a lot of basketball. So I'm sure there's some fine tuning going on. But if that's the part that is clicking least and we're getting everything else, then that seems really promising to me. I attempted to watch the game using FIBA's Courtside 1891 website, and for whatever reason could not get through. So I was not able to see anything other than just what was on the web, but the general consensus was that Luka looked great, and the clips that I saw, he looked great. I also want to use this as an opportunity because a couple shows ago when we were talking about Eurobasket and my lack of knowledge, previous indifference towards it, I said
Monday's episode is what we will refer to now as the Andy's an Ugly American episode.
Sure, whatever. I mean, but here's the thing. First of all, I'm never ugly. But secondly, I don't consider this even stereotypical ugly American because, as I'm going to explain, and I'm going to read a pinned comment that I had in the YouTube comments section for the show, and we always invite the feedback. We always invite the comments. We want to hear from you. There were a couple things that I had said in terms of I had suspected that Luka, the enthusiasm for Slovenia and Eurobasket was going to be largely about Luka fans from Slovenia, and got a lot of correction with that and some other stuff. So I'm just going to read verbatim what I said to our audience and the viewers because I felt it was worth mentioning. It's very clear that Luka fans from all over Europe get excited to watch him in Eurobasket and other comparable tournaments, as opposed to merely the Slovenian Luka fans. We, or at least I, assumed more of a pure Slovenian home country fervor, but that's apparently not the case. I remain confident about our assertion that most American-born Laker/Luka fans are not as inherently invested in these tournaments, but it's still great to learn more about Luka's international fan base and cultural consumption of basketball. Second, so it's clear, and the lack of clarity is on us, not the audience, neither of us was disparaging the quality of Eurobasket in explaining and joking how little we actually know about the tournament or how little interest we've paid to it pre-Luka. As I've said on many previous shows, I've always been an American-based league sports fan rather than somebody who seeks out sports everywhere I can get them. And because of that, I have not watched something like Eurobasket, and I have not bothered to learn anything about it. And this is not xenophobic or jingoistic in attitude. I'm largely indifferent to Americans competing in the Olympics because, again, it's not a league. Brian is largely the same as well. That indifference, though, is not a commentary on the quality or importance of these settings, just transparency. We don't pretend to be what we're not to please our audience. We'd rather be honest. All that said, we will cover these games to the best of our abilities. It's not always easy, given the time difference and other factors. Editor's note, like FIBA's website. But again, we will try. Either way, felt like this was worth clarifying because it understandably rubbed some of our audience the wrong way. So we're going to learn more about it. We're going to learn more about Eurobasket. We're going to learn more about Luka culturally. And honestly, it's really awesome. I actually think this has been something that I found really fun, like learning the worldwide audience for Luka Donćić.
You guys can all treat Andy like he's a small child discovering the world for the first time, a babe in the woods of international basketball.
I am a babe in the woods of Eurobasket. I will be the first to admit it. I don't know jack bleep about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's yeah, I mean, it is true. I'm not a big fan of. I don't care if the U.S. wins the Olympics or things like that because I don't really wrap my national pride in the success of our basketball program. No. And the rest of the world is really good at this. And I mean, I watch Olympic basketball especially when the Olympics take place in time zones where it makes it a little easier. But
and when American or just NBA players in general are in it, like USA Spain in 2008 was awesome because it was basically an NBA game,
right?
Like from my perspective, that was a great game.
We would watch when Kobe was playing or LeBron or AD or guys like that because it's for. But like if it's I miss games. I'm not gonna lie about it. But it's one of these things where multiple things can be good at once. Where, most Lakers fans, I think most Lakers fans have not to this point been Eurobasket fans. Most Lakers fans, I think, if you pin them down, not that they would say Luka shouldn't play for Slovenia, because I think basketball fans generally recognize not only how hard it is to tell players of any nationality you can't play for your national team, but particularly players like Luka, who represent smaller countries with smaller programs and understand the value and the importance that they play inside not just their own basketball programs, really inside their own nation, in ways that transcend sport. Like, they take this obligation seriously. You can't tell them that they can't do it. All of that said, if you could pin down most Lakers fans and say, would you prefer Luka play, and however small the injury risk might be, allow that to happen, or skip it this year? Why don't we just skip it this year? Most Lakers fans would say skip it this year, in the same way that a lot of Lakers fans didn't want AD to play or LeBron. Let somebody else win a gold medal. So all of those things come in. They're going to be nervous watching it play. None of it means that it can't be fun. Like, it's still fun to watch the Olympics. It's still fun to watch this stuff internationally. It's still fun to see Luka play well. And so, it is a thing that we will certainly be talking about on this program for as long as Luka is competing in it. And then when it's over and Luka has gotten through it playing well and not hurt himself, we will all breathe a sigh of relief and move on to the next thing. So congratulations to Luka for a good tune-up against Great Britain. And I believe that the last one before the real competition starts, or they have one more?
Remember, I told you I couldn't get on their website. I couldn't get that information.
So someone can, in the comments section, can tell us how many more of the tune-up games they have before the competition begins. And by that point, Andy and I will both have figured out how to make that app from FIBA work. Things that aren't working, Andy. Dalton Knecht. I'll explain next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And if you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And really, what's the point of having those accounts if you don't know anything? That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone, and you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart characterization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Like an example, my daughter's about to start high school. I already have to start thinking about college and tuition, dorm expenses. That can be really daunting. Monarch can help me streamline spending, figure out areas I could be more efficient, maybe areas I shouldn't be spending at all, create plans for that very big next step. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first year.
Okay, Andy, we have spent plenty of time talking about how Dalton Knecht had a roller coaster of a year, to say the least, in his rookie season. It was filled with some highs. It had plenty of lows, but in the end, it was seen, I think, as disappointing, in part because as the games grew more important, he played less. And less and less and less. Kostas Georgatos, Georgatos, I apologize for getting the name wrong, points out, I did ask at the end of the last segment how many more tune-up games. They play Slovenia Slovenia plays Serbia on Thursday. That's the last game before the tournament begins. Thank you very much, Kostas. And then I think it was compounded by what everyone agrees was a lousy summer league. There's no question Dalton did not play well. So it's not uncommon, particularly this time of year, to revisit drafts. You revisit all kinds of free agent signings, all this other stuff. So the Athletic went back and did a redraft of the 2024 draft, where the Lakers were stoked to have Dalton Knecht fall to them. And he didn't make the top 20. And this was not a draft full of superstars. The redrafters at the Athletic did not put Dalton in there in that top 20, which was not necessarily unfair, but certainly not what you would have expected had you guessed what was coming, say, last November.
Right. And as a reminder, Dalton was picked 17th overall, and Sam Vecini, who did this for the Athletic, and for what it's worth, he one of his main specialties is the NBA draft, which doesn't necessarily mean his opinion here is the be all end all, but it does mean he spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff and knows drafting and such.
Does a lot of work figuring the
right.
Yeah.
He had at 17 now Terrence Shannon Jr. With the Timberwolves, who was originally picked at 27. And what's interesting about that in and of itself is it's one of those things where, on one hand, I would say right now, I actually find Terrence Shannon Jr. more intriguing in certain respects than Dalton. He did not play a lot in the playoffs for the Timberwolves, although when he did, he looked very good. Mm-hmm. And his playing time was up and down with the Timberwolves as well. But when he played, he did often look good. Dalton, as you mentioned, Brian, fell out of the top 20. The thing that they said about, or that Sam said about Dalton at the end, quote, Dalton Knecht is another notable omission. His defense was a mess all season for the Los Angeles Lakers, and the 17th pick didn't look particularly good on offense after the Lakers tried to trade him in the ill-fated Mark Williams deal. And I remember we talked a couple weeks ago about Dalton in a show in reaction to a podcast with Jovan Buha and Kranjus McBasketball, talking about their projection that for the time being, Dalton won't be in the rotation, or does not project to be in the rotation the way they see it, which is obviously not official. They don't get a vote in this stuff. But you combine that with some of the other...
let's stop for a second, though. If you were drawing up, not that Dalton will never play, but the night in, night out, 9 guys who likely play consistent minutes, would you put Dalton in that group? I wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't have him in pen. I think there's a possibility you can write him in pencil, but definitely not pen.
Yeah, I don't think as the season starts, he has a spot in the sort of assumed rotation. So,
certainly not the assumed rotation.
Right.
No,
I'm not saying can't get there. And he's going to play. Guys get hurt. The same 9 guys don't play all season. But Jovan's making this list. Tim underscore NBA, Kranjus McBasketball, Lakers exceptionalism pod. He didn't have him in there either.
I've heard of others. Anthony Irwin's been very down on.
Yeah,
Dalton. I've heard others as well.
Right. Most people are not including Dalton in the presumed rotation as they go into training camp in a month or a month and a half, whatever it is.
What I think, though, is interesting about this, like we had talked before, the conversation from Jovan and Kranjus led to us discussing the idea of Dalton's basketball IQ, which is something you in particular have been concerned about and increasingly skeptical about, particularly because he is seen, because of his age, he just turned 24, as more of a finished product. And you and I talked about how I don't think that is, it's not the way I would evaluate Dalton. And for what it's worth, it's what I said about him when they drafted him, that I actually thought that he was at the time a 23-year-old, that because he had advanced in so many different levels in college, from JUCO to Northern Colorado to Tennessee in just 1 year at Tennessee, my assumption was that he's actually the rare 23-year-old with, at least theoretically, a pretty high ceiling for growth, just because he's not a 23-year-old who spent 3 years at Tennessee and you would, at least theoretically, see as a more finished product. He's also, too, I don't think it's fair to think of him as more of a finished product, but then also get upset that he doesn't seem to be picking up quickly the totally new asks of him as an NBA player versus what he was doing in college. You got to pick a lane.
If I just to stop here for a second. I do think finished product to me is not necessarily, it's close to, but not exactly, at least in my mind, the right way to think about it. It's not that they think he's a finished product in the sense that he's undergone all the polishing and all that kind of stuff and has a refined game and an innate sense. It's that generally, not a hard and fast rule, more improvement happens, more growth happens. The perception is that for more players, you'll get more growth from 19 to 23 than you do from 23 to 26. It's not that people expect Dalton to show up in the league with all the fine points taken care of. It's that there's just generally seen, because, broadly, and there are always going to be exceptions on both sides of this, you see less of that sort of big leap improvement for players who enter the league older. Doesn't mean it never happens, but that, I think, like that to me, I think, and it is highly relevant to a redraft for something like this, the perception of there's less room for growth with Knecht, that then plays into all the questions of defense and, basketball IQ and all that other stuff we were talking about. That to me is where sort of the age and finished product, so to speak, thing plays in.
Right. And again, like I said, I consider Dalton very, very different in terms of his path than probably 90% of other players who enter the league at 23, which is why I personally consider him very different. But coming up, though, I want to explain why, at least, and you and I were talking about this offline, I think there's been some over-indexing going on with the way we've evaluated Dalton, both negatively and positively. I think that's affected everybody's perceptions. I'll explain that coming up next. So it's interesting. Obviously, Dalton's second half of the season was seen as very disappointing. His playing time went down. He was an absolute non-factor in the playoffs. He seemed to have been shaken in some respects by the rescinded trade, which is understandable. It's a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. Really, veteran players often have a difficult time wrapping their head around a trade, even players that have been traded before, much less somebody who had only been in the NBA 3 or 4 months. And the whole thing, he actually reported to Charlotte. It's not even like this, he found out about it and then it was rescinded. Pau Gasol never went to Houston in the Chris Paul veto deal by the league. I don't think he ever left the state. Dalton Knecht was actually in the Charlotte facility. This was really strange. But also, too, do
you think he got to keep, if they gave him some swag, could he keep it, or do you have to give that back?
You cannot ask for it back. You can't ask for it.
I just feel like if any organizations, because you can take the jersey back and just take the lettering off. If any team's going to do that, it's going to be Charlotte. I feel
no, man. I'm sorry. They're owned by billionaires. Dalton is still on a rookie scale deal. You let him keep the swag.
I would. I'm just wondering. I wonder if he got to keep any stuff.
I'll say this: if they didn't let Dalton keep anything from Charlotte, shame on them.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? Remember that day when Andy and I used to split an apartment when I first moved out here, and I used to be a teacher, and about a week before school, I got a call. I got come into the school, whatever, and I told Andy, I was like, I'm losing my job here. And he's like, that's ridiculous. School starts in a week. I went in, I had this meeting, totally got laid off. The only thing I could think to do was steal a lot of paper. So if I took 5 reams of paper with me on my way out of this school, Dalton Knecht should grab every piece of Hornets gear he can find.
Absolutely. I certainly hope that he did. If that's the case, I would like to think that Charlotte did the right thing and just said, you know what, keep the stuff for your troubles. But, it is.
And also, let us validate your parking.
But it is Charlotte after all.
Right.
But if you actually look, though, at Dalton's stats in the second half and his splits in the second half. For example, it can be a little bit hard to read them right now, but I try to post them in a graphic. But from behind the arc, before the All-Star break, Dalton averaged 36%. Post All-Star break, almost 41%. Basically the same amount of attempts despite playing 3 or 4 fewer minutes per game. His overall field goal percentage, pre-All-Star break, 46.4. Post All-Star break, 45.7. So negligible. It is basically the same production. If you look at Dalton's numbers compared to other rookies in the league, like his points per game, he's 11th in the league, really tied for 10th with Yves Missi, 9.1 points per game. And if you look at this list of players ahead of him, Stephon Castle, Alex Sarr, Zachary Richichet, Jalen Wells, Justin Edwards, Bub Carrington, Kyle Filipowski, Kel'el Ware, Zach Edey, Yves Missi. Like, Dalton's one of the only guys playing on a team that did anything of worth at all. He had the highest 3-point percentage of anybody top 10 or higher for points per game. And in some ways, I've been wondering, caveat stated, I have concerns about Dalton as well. I don't think there is no reason to have concerns about him. His summer league was, to put it mildly, disturbing. But I've really been wondering now if we are starting to over-index towards negativity in evaluating the second half of the season, in part because I think in retrospect, we were over-indexing just how good he played pre-All-Star break. And in particular, the first couple months, that 37-point explosion came, I want to say, like in November. And, this is at a time when all of a sudden the national conversation is, can the Lakers even think about taking Dalton Knecht out of the starting lineup? And I think we may have been overdoing it, like all of us, including you and me, Brian, like everybody.
Oh, no, there were times I was like, wait a minute, and he did start a couple games, but do they need to make more room for me? Yeah, there's no question. We all got excited.
I think in retrospect, we were over-indexing some of the way we were propping up Dalton. And now in return, we are, I would say, over-indexing his post-All-Star break season, really post-trade deadline, to be worse than it actually was, even with, again, concerns being valid.
Yeah. I think there is definitely truth to that. I think it's a great point, and, prisoner of the moment in both, moments. That's where the expression comes from. But I will say this. I would agree with you even more if statistics were the basis and the core of the foundation for why people, I think, got down on Dalton. I think it is less a statistical argument than an acknowledgement of why he was finding it so difficult to get on the floor. It wasn't because he couldn't hit an outside shot, although he did tend to play better in fourth quarters, play better, kind of find his way. And some of that's just rhythm. Some of it's maybe the pressure's off. Some of it is his role changes. And in the fourth quarter, when it's garbage time and he's depending.
I was going to say some of it he's not playing any other time but the fourth quarter.
He would play in games a little bit and then they'd leave him on the floor in the fourth quarter and he would really thrive because he's got the ball in his hands more. The offense starts to revolve around him and he's playing maybe a role that he's more conventionally used to, like what he did at Tennessee versus what he's being asked to do in the NBA. But, and this was mentioned by Sam in his story. We've talked about it. JJ Redick has alluded to it. Other analysts have alluded to it. It's the fact that he particularly defensively, didn't seem to be picking up what needed to be done. Not that you would expect him to become a plus defender, but just that it became harder and harder and harder as the games grew more important to allow him to play, because defensively he was really screwing up their defensive structure. So I think that's part of it. And then you start to add in the questions about, is he picking it up offensively, what he's supposed to be doing? Like, I I think it would be.
I mean, the defensive concerns were there when everybody was going crazy
no
about
question. But we also pointed out, like, he needs to, if the defense doesn't get better, he's got to produce offensively at a pretty special rate. He's got to be a difference maker as a shooter, as an offensive player, so that kind of like we were talking about with the trio of Austin, Luca, and LeBron, like those guys, one of the reasons you want them to really click is so that offensively you're through the roof, and you can, relatively speaking, if you're pretty good or average defensively, it works out well in your favor. Dalton's got to be a really plus offensive player, so that being, ideally a neutral defensively, you still get to play him. He wasn't that. And so I will say this, NBA defense is really flipping hard, and it can take certain players a long time to get the hang of it. So I think it's way too early to write him off, sentence out without getting the sneeze. I was so close. Couldn't land the plane. But a lot of it is the age.
Yeah, it's funny because when you were saying before the offensive production needs to be through the roof to cover the defense, the offense was basically the same all season. And again, I think some of the reason he stopped playing, it was pointed out by a commenter, I don't have it in front of me, but Jordan Goodwin's very unexpected place on this team, but then B, performance, that squeezed some of Dalton's minutes.
No question.
It became
especially early Goodwin, who was hitting 3-pointers.
Right. And it's also being pointed out by Oletsky Narasiga. I apologize, but we're running low on time.
Our Ukrainian friend.
On Dalton, in my humble opinion, he was drafted for a Braun and AD team. Now they're trying to figure things out with a Luca and Braun team. NBA is tougher than college. Give the guy some more time.
Sure.
I think there's a lot in there. And again, I don't think people are over-indexing the idea of being concerned about Dalton. Like that, I totally understand that. Again, I have concerns. I just think in retrospect, there was too much hype over the way he played in the first couple months. And that only makes it so some of what happened in the second half, which includes rookies typically start playing less on serious teams the closer you get to the playoffs. I think that has led to some over-indexing towards the negative. That's all. In the end, Dalton still has to be better.
I think the fundamental question with Dalton is at the NBA level, he is likely, and I think people pointed out, like, you got to adjust to being a Luka, LeBron, like all that. Like on paper, he's the type of player who should thrive around Luka Donćić.
Mm-hmm.
Good outside shooter, can shoot from any way, shape, or form. He can shoot coming off movement as a catch and shoot guy. All of that, like, so that's how he's gonna. Can he develop maybe one more skill? Because he's not going to have the ball in his hands as a primary attacking player, but he could over time become sort of your primary bench scorer, something like that. I think that's a role. And can he get good enough at the stuff that he's bad at that you can justify playing him? Because the NBA is littered with players who are really good offensive players and are so bad defensively that they can't play, they can't stick, or players who are difference makers defensively, but are such net negatives offensively, you can't put them on the floor. And so the Lakers just need Dalton to move past that. It's just it's an interesting space that the Lakers are in. We're interested in your thoughts about Dalton. Leave them in the comment section and leave us questions, leave us topics that you want to hear us discuss on the show. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 36,000 subscribers, all of whom should be doing exactly as I said, leaving those questions and comments. Subscribe on Apple, subscribe on Spotify to the audio version. We'll see everyone tomorrow.